We have a bunch of people from across the Zcash ecosystem here. I'm going to let them all introduce themselves, starting with Nate.
Yes, hello. Is this on? I'm Nate. I work at ECC. My title is Chief Research Officer, and I live in California.
My name is ZEC. I work on many proof-of-stake things and many blockchains, but I'm also on the Electric Coin Company board, or the Bootstrap board, and I help, and I've been very involved in the launch of Cosmos, which is a proof-of-stake protocol that has come up in the previous discussion.
My name's Matt. I'm a professor, and I also have been involved in Zcash for a long time. I'm on the Zcash Foundation board, and excited about all the tech.
Hi all, I'm Daniel Benarach. I'm Director of Research at Kedit, and one of the main organizers at ZK Proof, the standardization effort for zero-knowledge proof. And today I'm mostly working on the shielded asset project with the rest of the Kedit team.
Okay.
And this is Naama.
Who is potentially, literally, the future of Zcash. But let's get it started off. Let's start off with a quick, everybody give their kind of 5-minute pitch of what they believe the future of Zcash is. Let's start with you, Nate.
Okay, so I think that a lot of people around the industry who talk about the future, I kind of think there's two common themes that are complementary but have a different focus. So I think of it as some people are focused on building up to replace or disrupt things. So let's disrupt finance, let's disrupt governance or media or whatever with DeFi and DAOs and programmability. And then I sort of think other people focus on what I think of as building out to meet the needs of different people around the world. And I think they're complementary and different ways at looking at the same thing. I'm really interested in focusing more on building out to help people where I think cryptocurrency today already can meet some of the needs they need, especially in authoritarian regimes or regimes with failing monetary systems. And so thinking that way leads me to sort of prioritize what I perceive as features they might want or need. And so I feel like there's pretty clear evidence in places like Latin America, like Venezuela, or the like, where there's struggling monetary systems that people really want dollar-denominated tokens because they are used to relying on the dollar to avoid their local currency issues. I think that around the world there's many places struggling with inflation, which is often related to monetary supply mismanagement. And so I think non-discretionary issuance policies are likely to be useful or appealing to those people. I think that many of those people need much better UX and they need much lower fees. So an example is I heard on a recent Unchained podcast with, I think his name is Mauricio, a CEO of Ledin, who came out of Venezuela. He said, people use things like Tether and the usage of which blockchain they don't care about which blockchain. So as Ethereum became very expensive in terms of transaction fees, he mentioned one thing that's pretty popular now is the Tron blockchain. And I think that's an example of how focusing on what's going on kind of in the trenches with real world users can be different than crypto Twitter, because I don't personally have a great opinion of Tron, like technologically or in terms of governance or anything, but it's actually useful for these people simply because it happens to have low fees now. So for Zcash, I'm interested in adding multiple assets so we can get stable coins. I'm interested in keeping the issuance rules non-discretionary and sort of limited supply. I'm interested in lowering fees through scalability. And I'm definitely interested in privacy. I think a lot of these user populations need privacy, and we have that, and we can provide it better if we keep pushing on usability and good mobile light wallets. And I love stuff like DeFi, DAOs, NFTs, and I do see that as being important and moving the needle, but I kind of see that as maybe a slower process for meeting the needs of those kinds of populations, even though those use cases may be really valuable for like Western populations. So that's sort of my focus.
Zaki?
So about 6 years ago, started working on Cosmos. But it is, so people understand what Cosmos is now, I think, or many people, if you've used it or you interact with it or you've read about it in the media, you can find out what Cosmos is today, about this network of IBC-connected blockchains. But I think it comes down to a little bit about like why we thought Cosmos was an important thing to build. And the reason why we thought Cosmos was an important thing to build really comes down to this idea of, so, you know, we've had sort of many blockchains since about 2013. But the primary source of interoperability between those blockchains was centralized exchanges. So you had an exchange, you know, you could send your assets to that exchange, you could swap it for other assets on that centralized exchange. KYC has become more and more common until it's become sort of universal. But you know, centralized exchanges were this form of interoperability. And we hypothesized back in 2015, 2016, that there was this future in which the flows of value between blockchains would actually happen from one blockchain to another blockchain rather directly without a centralized exchange as an intermediary. And we thought that this would be like really important for like the blockchain, sort of the potential of blockchains to be like realized for both the technical innovation level, the user experience level, because we believed that sort of application-specific blockchains are perhaps one of the best architectures, that there are inherent trade-offs every time you build a blockchain between different use cases and different requirements. And these things have become more and more evident as things like miner extractable value from like the block proposer being able to extract value from reordering transactions have become real. We've started to see like this vision realized in a very tangible, realizable, empirically measurable way, that there are like deep trade-offs between all the different set of use case or reasons why you would build a blockchain. So if you have this world of blockchains that can be sort of designed to meet specific use cases, and then you have interoperability at the protocol layer and at the asset layer directly between these blockchains in a way that is does not have a permissioned intermediary, does not have any easy place to censor those interactions, you get this architecture of a very large-scale system that can deliver like very specific, hyper-specific, hyper-effective user experiences, like decentralized exchanges with user experiences comparable to centralized exchanges, privacy applications that can like innovate at various layers of the system, things that are focused on NFTs and DAOs and all of these other pieces, innovations of many smart contracts and stuff like that. So I think one of the real questions though is we have this like, so like I think that, you know, we're already living in a world where most new assets that exist will exist within this like larger framework that like Cosmos was intended to address. That like bridges and interoperability will be priorities from the ground up for most new assets that exist. So now we have this like legacy of older assets, Bitcoin, Zcash, et cetera, that don't have, that like existed before this paradigm. And I think the future of Zcash is to sort of upgrade Zcash to fit into this world. And if we don't, finding a differentiated, useful place for both ZEC, the asset, and for the Zcash blockchain in this world ensures a long-term life for Zcash. And that is the most important task.
Matt.
Okay, well, the easiest thing to say about Zcash is that Zcash started as a kind of experiment. And I don't mean a scientific experiment. I mean, I think Zcash is really a very important piece of a really long story that goes back to the 1980s at least, where people have tried for years to sort of combat the fact that everything digital is centralizing and losing privacy by building some of those old expectations of privacy back into technology. And I think Zcash, that experiment is a really, courageous and important experiment. I don't want to make Zcash seem like the most important thing in the world, but I do think it's important. And I think keeping Zcash moving against, groups of people who would like technology like this not to exist is critical. And if we lose this battle, there are a lot of costs to the world. You probably saw the news today about Tornado Cash. And if you didn't see the news about Tornado Cash, well, maybe you didn't think it was a big deal, but if you saw it. But what is happening now is what we thought would happen in the early days of Zcash. We thought 2 years, a year after Zcash launched, governments would step in and they would send in, men in suits and they would shut it all down. And, there would have to be some kind of way that privacy would go on without it. None of that happened, and we all felt really silly about it. We felt like this was, us being a bunch of academics and play acting at being important. But I think that we're starting to see now that when privacy actually gets usage, when it starts to get usage, especially criminal usage, which is kind of inevitable, there is a reaction. There is a very strong pushback. And I think that as that reaction starts to snowball, as we start to see more and more governments get a taste for shutting down those systems, because there's always going to be some degree of criminal behavior in privacy systems, there's going to be an acceleration in the use of those techniques to kind of make privacy systems go away. Because I do believe that a lot of governments feel that decentralized currencies are very tractable, but privacy is kind of where you draw the line. So what's the future for Zcash in a world where that happens? And that's really all I think about. But that's not like itself the answer to the question, right? The answer to the question is, what do you have to do to make Zcash have a future in a world that is hostile to privacy-preserving systems? And I think the answer to that question is a lot of the stuff that people here are already doing. I wish we could do it faster. And a lot of my last 2 years, 3 years of pandemic is me jumping up and down and pissing people off and kind of ruining some friendships by saying, why are you going so slow? Don't you see what's about to happen? And what I think is necessary, the future of Zcash is, as Zaki just said, interconnectivity. Zcash cannot be an island. It is useless as an island. It has to be attached to the rest of the blockchain infrastructure, and not just attached by a few flaky bridges, but very essentially attached by decentralized systems that are robust. I think Zcash has to do more than ZEC, and I love ZEC. I think it's a great, asset. But other currencies, other blockchain systems have managed to go beyond their base asset and be useful for other applications, and they didn't die. But this community, we spent a lot of months talking about whether we should have ZSAs, what that would do to the economy. Screw it. Let's just do it. Let's get it there. Let's stop delaying. Let's make it possible to move all sorts of assets with financial privacy. And third, we need to have technologies that we haven't even thought of right now. When you go through a bridge today, whether it's a direct IBC type bridge or whether it's a custodial bridge, do you have privacy? Has anyone thought about the problems of privacy on a bridge? I mean, maybe somebody out here is thinking about it, but if you are thinking about it, write it down, figure out what that looks like as you move between different private systems so we can increase the anonymity set and make these systems more robust and resilient to somebody just targeting each individual system and shutting them down. So in my opinion, the future of Zcash is as a system that provides financial privacy not just for one asset in one blockchain, but to the entire ecosystem, is tightly bound to that ecosystem, oh, I'm sorry about that, is completely functional, has every possible feature that we can feasibly implement that people need. In a perfect world, I would even say, let's have DeFi in Zcash, because there are going to be cases where exchanges are just not going to touch any asset that comes out of a privacy system. And right now, the answer to that is, well, you have to somehow like dribble over to Ethereum. You shouldn't have to do that. You should have capabilities to do more. So I think that is the future I want to see. And whether that ends up making everything worse and gets us shut down, I mean, at least we will have built the privacy infrastructure for somebody else to roll with. I don't think it's going to actually end up getting us shut down, but I think building this technology is what we are here for and what we should do. So I hope that's the future.
Daniel.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, everything that's been said is absolutely true. I mean, there isn't just one fact or one truth, right? I will start really short-term, sort of what I see, sort of one of the main obstacles, and it's exactly what Matt was saying, which is this idea of regulation, right? Like governments already in Europe, they're starting to look at Zcash with sort of a negative lens, and that's not something we want, right? Like we really want to get out of that sort of focus and focal point. We still don't know what ZSA is going to do to that type of government look, right? When people are going to start to onboard Ethereum assets on Zcash, what's stopping the US government from seeing Zcash as Tornado Cash, right? I mean, it's up to us to really make the effort to not only market Zcash differently, but also generate that usability that's positive for society and the world around us. The second short to medium term sort of obstacle that I really see in Zcash is generating a meaningful and really contributing developer community. We haven't made that possible yet because of the fact that there isn't a lot of programmability on Zcash. There isn't a lot of functionality that can just be created by, say, non-technical developers, like non-deep tech developers. And that's, I guess, something that we've been discussing in this conference, in previous conferences. We're not there yet, but we need to take steps, again, as Matt said, like work as fast as we can to get there, right? Because one of the main reasons why Ethereum became one of the main currencies is because of the type of developer and functionality community that they created, right? And still is today. You see it's the biggest developer community out there. And we know that that's what carries the values of Web3, right? In terms of long term and what Zcash can become, I guess I'll allude a little bit to the experience that I've had working at Kedit, where at the beginning of Kedit, we basically took Sapling and we built a sort of asset transfer solution for enterprise. And we went around, like we spoke to the biggest sort of companies in the world. Everybody was super interested. What happened was that everybody thought that they wanted blockchain. Of course, we know that enterprise blockchain is not real and probably won't be for the next, I don't know how many years. And we wanted to just provide privacy. It actually taught us a lot, even though we didn't really make, let's say, a sellable product, or we built the product but we didn't sell it, unfortunately. It taught us to build many use cases, from asset transfer for central banks to invoice financing to tracking of shipments around the world for physical assets, for financial assets. And it was really interesting to see the common ground of all these use cases. And what we realized really was that identity is at the core of these things, right? So when I envision Zcash in 10, 15, 20 years, I really envision it as like, the Web3 anonymity pool for identity in Web3. And not only for assets and financial privacy, that's of course, comes in with identity, but also for really like your identity, assets, credentials, everything that comes with it. There are a lot of identity solutions being built on Ethereum specifically, but inherently they're not going to be private. And we cannot allow to have an identity ecosystem or system that's not private. That's shooting ourselves in the foot, in my opinion. And just to add to that, like when we think about the opposition that can come to these identity solutions or programmability, private programmability, etc., we need to keep in mind, and we need to always tell the governments and educate everybody that cryptography has the power to not only give us the privacy, but also to, let's say, open up small windows of consent whenever they're really required, not by governments, but by a legitimate sort of concern for crime or fraudulent behavior. And I really think that's where we need to go. So, yeah.
I want to pick up on something that you talked about, which is attracting more developers to the Zcash ecosystem. Kedit is one of the most significant development teams to join the ecosystem formally, though you were doing audits for quite some time. How do we get more? How do we attract more? What do we need to be doing?
So it's a really good question, because I guess we have an advantage at Kedit, and that's really that we've been working on the Zcash protocol for a while, even though not on Zcash, right? We did the sapling audit, and that allowed us to build a product around sapling. Then we did the orchard audit, and that let us say, okay, now we want to build on actual Zcash, right? Because we realized that enterprise wasn't necessarily the way for us. I don't know how easy it is to go through that path for many developer teams, because that made us really understand the depth of the technicalities, right, of the protocol. And one challenge that we have is really to try to abstract in future protocol updates some of that technical depth, so that applications can be built a little bit more easily, quote unquote, without having to think about how to write a circuit necessarily, right? This is a challenge for all zero-knowledge systems in some sense, but for Zcash specifically, it's a big one.
Zaki, you've worked with ecosystems, with many participants. What are your thoughts on this question?
On the developer?
Attracting more developers to the Zcash ecosystem.
Okay, so I guess I have a somewhat controversial view of this, which is that I don't think that Zcash has an easy way to have a differentiated advantage in attracting developers. Attracting and supporting developers in a platform ecosystem, a blockchain ecosystem, is an enormous investment of resources. So we have this my experience with this is building Cosmos SDK. We have hundreds, thousands of people who contribute, use 40 L1 blockchains that use this system, and just the coordination costs, the building developer documentation, IDEs, debugging tools, all of these things that are required to continue to scale onboarding developers across a variety of different languages and all of this stuff are this massive investments. And there are more than a few teams that have raised large amounts of money and are solely focused on doing this for zero knowledge. And so I think it is somewhat the Zcash community has to be realistic about whether or not this is a place where they can have differentiated competitive advantage. And I'm skeptical of this is where the place that Zcash can win.
How can we change that?
Well, I don't know that you have to change that. I think you just have to find places where you can win. I don't think that it is a necessary prerequisite for the victory of a blockchain or to be the place that has the most developers. There is a place in the ecosystem. One of the other things, though, that all of the sort of developer-centric blockchains actually really struggle with is the fact that the developers are very mercurial and mercenary. There's a lot of this foundation gave me a grant, so I'll go build on their platform, and if tomorrow another foundation shows up with a bigger grant, maybe we'll just go over there. So you have this mercenary developer population. Most people who are building on EVMs and Ethereums at this point don't care about Ethereum, and they don't care about the EVM, and they're we'll deploy on Avalanche, we'll deploy on Ethereum, we'll deploy on Optimism, we'll deploy on Arbitrum. We don't really care which one wins or doesn't win or any of this stuff. And you have all of these teams that have hundreds of millions of dollars in their treasuries, burning through, or billions of dollars in their treasuries in some cases, burning through those treasuries, trying to keep these developers attached to their platforms when they're just well, I'm just trying to get to the most users as I can, and I'm just sort of parasitic on your network effects, and so I don't necessarily. I think that the best strategy for Zcash is to be a little bit more selective about like, what developers are you bringing into the platform. I think one of the wisest things that we did in Cosmos is, at the time, 2019 when we launched, a lot of people came to me and said like, Zucky, do a Cosmos ecosystem fund, and I was like, no, that'll just like attract all the wrong people. Like, what we ended up attracting was like a bunch of people who were like willing to like eat glass and become like essentially addicted to building on top of Cosmos, and like none of these people ever leave. Now the market is changing, and Cosmos ecosystem funds are happening now, and it is a very different place. But we're building on this base of people who are just like not willing to leave, and so it is real. It's a weird, and it's like not obviously. It shouldn't be obvious that it is the long-term winning metric to just be like more developers equals win.
Matt, I saw you nodding.
Is that me? Sorry, go ahead. What did you say?
I saw you nodding at some of what Zaki was saying.
We need developers, right? We need developers to build things. We need developers to build applications, wallets, all of these things. We are fortunate in that, we have fewer opportunities for developers, but we're weaker in the sense that we have fewer opportunities for developers to do things. And one part of that is that a lot of the core consensus and a lot of the cool things that you can do on Zcash are wrapped up inside of, one company and one foundation. And it's harder, we don't have a programmable EVM, right? Like, so you can't launch a DeFi app, like tough. If you want to contribute something, as Keddit is, you can go off and you can develop for a long time, but then integration still requires a lot of help. So I do think one thing we could do is we could get a lot better at telling developers in advance that their work will be valued, their work will be integrated into the protocol. There's no shrug. There's no, why don't you go do it and spend, a year's worth of your time and we'll think about it. That, I think, is a weakness of Zcash we got to fix.
Nathan, what's ECC's perspective on this?
So I don't know about ECC generally, but yeah, my perspective is, I guess I've been interested in interoperability as a way to connect to other communities. So, there's sort of like the technical angle. Interoperability enables, more products and services to interact with Zcash or ZEC. But there's also the social angle. Like, as we develop interoperability with more teams across the space, we have more incentive to like collaborate with them and co-develop things. So I think we see some of that already here with like different teams working on zero knowledge proving, and we see some of that with Halo. That's promising to see where this is more of a platform solution that's useful to more teams, and we can collaborate on similar projects such as compilers or high-level languages that can be used in more places. So that's my thinking there.
I'm going to turn, sorry, does somebody?
No, just to add to Nate's point in terms of like working with other communities, there is an opportunity here because a lot of the zero knowledge hype building is happening on the Ethereum ecosystem, where like, again, you don't really get the pure privacy that that I think those developers really are looking for. So there's, there's been before collaborations with Ethereum at that level, but I think maybe we can do a little bit something larger in terms of an actual event, workshop. Maybe we should have a bigger presence at like DevCon and ECC, all these conferences. That's like a first good step to take for Zcash,
Yeah, one of the things that I've thought about a lot, from the foundation's perspective is what is the balance to be struck between our role in improving Zcash and our role in making or laying fertile ground for others to come in and improve Zcash. And it's it's a tricky, first of all, it's a tricky way. It's tricky to assess where that balance should be, and also then it's tricky to figure out how to make it fertile ground for others to come in. but it's something that we will continue to grapple with and continue to try to figure out how to solve. I'm going to turn to Discord now because we've had some really good questions coming in. First one is, what types of projects or research would be the biggest benefit to the future of Zcash? I'm going to throw that open for anybody to respond.
So we had a workshop today about potential sort of shared roadmap or future applications, and I feel like it's not always clear that the full extent of programmability is needed in Zcash, because first of all, you're not really going to use all the extent. Like, that's a very theoretical problem that you're going to be solving. And second of all, maybe some features or applications are better off as specific features, right? And there is another trade-off in terms of what needs to be public, in terms of the application requirements, what can be private, and how do you make it happen? What other cryptographic tools do you bring in, MPC for certain AMM processes, or can you use homomorphic encryption on top of zero knowledge? And there is a lot of questions, and I think like answering that question in a way that's contextualized, with the community, the different teams that are working, and sort of for the benefit of the future of Zcash is going to be key to success, I think.
Yeah, I mean, research questions, I agree with all that. But yeah, I mean, look, Zcash solves one problem, which is we can verify zero-knowledge proofs on chain, and we can do payments. But you could add layers to it, right? There are people who have tried to do private smart contract systems using trusted hardware, and I didn't particularly find their implementations of that very convincing, but that doesn't mean it can't be done, and if you can do it, you can integrate with Zcash, and you could do a lot of things. You could do a lot of very powerful, DeFi stuff on a kind of separate chain or a separate set of validators, and then submit proofs that you've done it right into the Zcash network. And with a little bit of modification to Zcash, you could probably handle a lot of things that make Zcash very, very powerful. So there are tons of research there. I would love to see more people thinking about like custody and MPC and how to do that with Zcash. These are big, big, big problems. I don't know. Bridges, I already mentioned. Privacy for bridges, all sorts of things like that. So many different areas where you could make the community better.
My thought process is less that Zcash needs research at like the frontiers of the unsolved problems of like cryptography and distributed systems, and more a period of trying to look at the broader blockchain ecosystem and all of the like production systems that have been built, and trying to understand like how those should all inform how Zcash fits into the broader ecosystem. When over the last few years, like really like incredibly sophisticated recursive zero knowledge systems, like multi-party computation systems for like key management and bridging and overlay protocols and whatnot have all become a reality. But it's like, I feel like there's a gap between Zcash still has a tendency to like leap towards the academic frontier instead of realizing that like there's been a bunch of things that have been built and how those things should actually inform the future of Zcash, and like that sort of translational research is somewhat missing in the Zcash community.
Nathan, I guess the question to you is slightly different. Obviously, ECC is going to be doing the things that they believe are going to deliver the greatest benefit to Zcash.
Yeah.
What are the things that that you believe could best be done by other organizations beyond ECC?
Oh, yeah, that's a lot easier to answer because there's a lot of stuff I think is potentially super valuable that we just don't have the space to focus on. So I am super interested in bridging and interoperability and the kinds of approaches Matt was alluding to, where you might have some sort of second layer that provides programmability. And ECC's focus is more on, right now making a usable wallet and doing this proof of stake transition. And I definitely want to see more than those two things happening in the Zcash ecosystem. So yeah, those are some things that come to mind.
If we are designing the future of Zcash in a world of interoperable blockchains, is it more important to focus on Zcash the blockchain or on ZEC the asset?
Or on?
Is it more important to focus on Zcash the blockchain or on ZEC the asset? I'll throw that one to Zaki from the interoperability perspective.
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of things that are, so I think in order for ZEC the asset to be valuable, Zcash the blockchain has to do something that is has to do like interesting, useful things. It can't just be like its distribution, its market recognition, its brand that drives that value. There must be utility to the underlying protocol. But interoperability gives us a unique opportunity to like reach out beyond the users of the Zcash blockchain to other communities. And for instance, have ZEC become collateral for stablecoins, or like all these other use cases for ZEC the asset in lending protocols, and all of these other just like community-oriented things, which just creates an opportunity to inform new people about the asset. Creates new communities that have an interest in the asset, and all of those things are very net value additive. So yeah, I think interoperability gives us a new frontier for focusing on the asset and creating community around the asset that is, I think, really important and is important to the long-term survival of Zcash.
I'm going to challenge you a bit on that. I'm going to ask you whether interoperability alone, given that other assets can also be interoperable, is enough to give Zcash a sufficient, competitive advantage in a world where there are now, thousands of different chains, and probably maybe about 100 at least, significant ones of the same order of size and adoption as Zcash.
So Zcash has some advantages in this world, where market cap isn't the only thing that matters, even though Zcash has a relatively good market cap. I mean, the reality of the situation is like, if you have some sort of new coin that is being launched, most of that coin is going to be held by like crypto funds that are operating on a 2 to 10 year time horizon. Zcash is largely not held by entities like that. You have Zcash, has a long history of price discovery on a variety of different venues. Zcash has a long history of where it sits in the regulatory sort of space. It has a broad community. It has excellent brand recognition. All of these things are like asymmetric advantages to being a coin with a bit of history behind it, and Zcash should be leveraging those things.
Anybody else like to comment on this question?
I think what Zaki said about the Zcash chain having sort of an underlying value in order to have, for the ZEC asset to have value is very important. Like it's, when, of course, we all know here that all the digital assets, their intrinsic value is that extra added value they bring, and the team and the developer community and so on and so on. And it's not a government printing money, right? And so I do think that Zcash is at the forefront of the technological development, and I think we still need to push in that direction. Zaki mentioned that maybe we should focus on other things, and I do think that it's definitely been the added value of Zcash right now. Sapling type protocols are being used in many other chains. It's inspired in several applications. Halo 2, and of course, not to say Grot 16 implementations, have been spread out through many different protocols. And I think really we should keep pushing. We should keep pushing, and collaborating at that level is important, but we should also focus on collaborating at the application level. We shouldn't only stay at the academic/technical implementation. Yeah.
No thoughts.
That's perfectly valid response.
Yeah.
Matt?
I think I could just repeat what they both just said, and
Okay.
it would be redundant.
Another question that came in on Discord is, some people say that Ethereum has the most developer mind share because it has programmability. But could there be other reasons, for example, a lack of privacy? So I guess, another way of asking this question is, maybe does Zcash's privacy, is it a disadvantage, or do the disadvantages of Zcash's privacy outweigh the advantages? I know what Matt's response is going to be, so let's hear from you first.
No, I don't know. Maybe it's not what you thought. I used to think that Ethereum was going to kick ass because they were going to put out a fully programmable system. And then, since they already support snarks, they'll just take all the advantages of Zcash and they'll bake them in, and it'll be awesome, and they'll win. I don't think that today. Actually, I haven't thought that for a while, but I definitely don't think that today. I think that if you're going to do privacy, you have to do privacy all the way. You can't just say privacy a little bit and it's going to be fine. I think the weakness of that strategy is very obvious and is going to get more obvious. So Ethereum has done wonderful things. They've done a bunch of great stuff. I will say one more thing about Ethereum though. Like the brilliance of Ethereum, so much of the brilliance of Ethereum is concentrated in the work they did in launching Ethereum, and that, they've slowed down too. Everyone slows down once they launch. There's that one kind of inspired thing that they do. There's nothing against Ethereum. Lots of people are innovating in that space too.
Yeah, once you have users, once you have a functioning system, it becomes a lot more difficult. Nate, you've had a lot of experience with this.
Yeah. I think that is a common dynamic. Once you have users, once you've launched, it's hard to continue development. So I do see one potential strength of the Zcash community is that we've stuck around and continued to develop and grow. And the thing is, that's always in a context where there's always going to be new projects that have the new stuff and none of the legacy. I kind of hope or expect that over a long enough time frame, that dynamic might become more obvious, where there are a few blockchains that have just been around forever, and we should aim for surviving that long.
On the topic of privacy as an advantage or not, I think, here we're all preaching to the choir, right? Like, we all here care about privacy and we understand that privacy is a human right and we need it, right, for the future of digital interaction. But the truth is that the majority of people don't really care about privacy. And we've seen this. We keep seeing it. Everybody uses, Ethereum applications as if it was the ultimate application for digital, their digital reality or financial reality and whatnot. And they don't care that, you have Chainalysis making all types of analysis on the chain and linking the transactions, and even on Tornado Cash, right? Like, the government is going against Tornado Cash when you actually can link the input and outputs most of the times, or most, depends on the specifics, but, quote unquote. And so it's the usual question, right? Like, is privacy the product? Is privacy a feature? Or should privacy just be something that the user doesn't see? But that the technologists and the product builders and the companies are inherently, knowledgeable and willing to put the effort to make that happen, because it's an inconvenience for the developers, right? To have to add privacy. So it needs to be like a kind of a also top and also down sort of approach. We need to educate the masses, but we also need to enforce it through potential regulation, right? But the right way, not the bad way. Right? So.
Another question from Discord. What does the panel think of partnerships with other chains, like, for example, the Secret Network? They have programmability, but you can't use Secret to pay for a coffee.
Wow. So Well, the first thing I would say is, or the first thing I'd be curious about is what is the difference between a partnership and collaborating on interoperability? So if a partnership means like agreements between like legal agreements or something between organizations, or setting roadmaps together, or something of that nature, that's one thing. And I don't, like Zcash can't do that because Zcash is decentralized and there's multiple organizations involved. So if partnerships means interoperability and collaboration, I'm generally in favor of that. But I would hope that we sort of prioritize like where the biggest bang for the buck is. So I would be more interested in interoperability to Ethereum or to Cosmos, or where we already have like a strong relationship or technological overlap. So like with some of the teams here, we already have like relationships and history, and we understand the connections between the technology. So that lends itself to more natural like partnerships between organizations. But in terms of Zcash itself, I think we should prioritize interoperability with where the most users are.
Zaki?
So in general, I would say that it is good to have that, like, yes, like community can be thought of as this like wider set of people who build blockchains. And community does not have to be like some sort of tribe that is the ZEC tribe, and that like other tribes are in conflict. But it is also like the more tangibly and technically interwoven projects are, the more these partnerships become like real, and it's not become just like the legal agreements. It becomes eventually just like, well, we all have to work together because our users are intertwined and our user bases are intertwined, our code connects with each other, our applications on top of each other make assumptions about each other's applications, so we still have to talk to each other. This is largely how Cosmos works right now. And so I think it's less about announcing partnerships and more about pursuing that kind of a community development strategy.
Matt?
Yeah, really, I think there are so many people working on independent teams, on zero knowledge work, on trusted hardware work, on network security, network privacy, and we should be collaborating with them. And I don't know what the right model is, if it's a Cosmos kind of world or if it's something else, but I really do wish we had fewer islands and we were all more linked in network.
No, I definitely agree with that. I think it's a pity that not only there are independent teams, but that a lot of work is sort of being reproduced independently, when it shouldn't necessarily be the case. It's also the case for Zcash in a way, right? Like we can always build, as Zaki was saying, we can build on what others have been doing, right? And we should learn about what other protocols are doing. And I think it should be a goal, and it is in a way, right? But more concretely. And as I said, like we should be part of maybe the Ethereum ecosystem a little more. And really there is a lot of like zero knowledge ecosystems lately. I mean, even, when we first had like the ZK proof workshops, even before Corona, like we were like, a few entities, some blockchains, some not, and so on. But now if we were to do a ZK proof, which by the way, just an incision, we have a ZK proof 5 coming up in November in Israel, so mark it down. I'm hoping to see there, dozens and, hopefully more than 100 different sort of representations, and that needs to happen. I personally, for the zero knowledge space, right? Like that's I think like what my focus is right now.
There's been a couple of questions on Discord about Zcash's digital cash to be used globally. What do you guys think is missing from Zcash, or what needs to be done to enable Zcash to become, what we used to call, internet money. The idea was that Zcash would become internet money, it would become the dominant means of payments on the internet. What do you think is missing right now to enable Zcash to fulfill that objective? We'll start with Nathan.
Well, there's a lot of things. Most pronounced in my mind right now is usable shielded wallets. And we have a lot of work to do on that front, but I also think Zcash shielded wallets are kind of ahead of the industry in a lot of ways around how do you make private light wallets. And so I would like to see us sort of double down on making those extremely usable. And if we can approach that goal, I think we should follow up on it with scalability. And I think those are two pieces that could help a lot with using ZEC for payments. There may be a lot more demand, especially in the short term, for using dollar-denominated tokens for payments. So this is another case where like ZSAs might move that needle also. Yeah, so that's at least 3 things that we could be improving a lot.
Zaki.
I guess I'm a bit of a payment skeptic when it comes to blockchains. I have mostly experienced like market demand for various forms of like social coordination systems from blockchains that are like really like many to many or like one to many or like these kinds of like complex sort of games that you can build, call them DeFi, call them DAOs, call them NFTs, but they're these sort of like multiplayer experiences, and in general, like payments are usually like a peer-to-peer experience, and so it seems it's not entirely clear to me that like blockchains are going to be the winning technology under any set of circumstances for like peer-to-peer or like person-to-merchant payments where you don't have all of these other like complex social coordination layers that people like to build on blockchains.
So when things like ZEC Wallet work, when you have previously provisioned, I've got like $50 of ZEC in my ZEC wallet, and I owe $10 to Strad. So when it works, it's magical. It's super fast, super efficient. The infrastructure really works. The problem is all the stuff that's really not just ZEC specific, but is crypto specific is like, how do you get currency? How do you deal with the volatility, which Nathan was talking about? How do you deal with all these things that are aggravating? And I remember it's actually gotten worse, right? Like in the early days when Shapeshift was a thing, like it was really easy to like do a whole bunch of stuff, and now it's harder and you have to use all sorts of like sketchy services. So, I mean, a lot of that infrastructure, again, not a ZEC specific problem. A lot of that stuff has to exist before payments are possible. And I actually do think payments are gonna happen. I do think it's gonna happen using some kind of stable coin. I would love to see a private stable coin on ZEC, like whether it's a backed one or an algorithmic one. If that happened, it would be at least really cool. Like it might also be the end of ZEC, but like it would be awesome. It would be like a good way to die. So I do think that payments are a thing, and I think that the tools for payments happening, past performance does not indicate that the future will not actually have payments on blockchains. Payments on blockchains are coming. We didn't have the infrastructure to do it right earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just basically everything that has been said, and I think just to add that the stable coin sort of idea on Zcash, in my opinion, is really, really powerful. I mean, I know that CBDC has the word centralized in it, but we could think about ways that stablecoin doesn't have to be centralized per se, or at least we could get some governments to support it, not necessarily to issue it, right? Like there's a different way of thinking about it. We actually were co-authors in a World Economic Forum paper about CBDCs, where we added a whole section around privacy requirements and like the trade-off between privacy and trust and the type of functionality that can be created with cryptography. So, I know the WEF is not like, actually defining policy around the world, hopefully influencing it in some ways, but that's, I think, a really good first step. So hopefully we'll see more of that. And I do think Zcash is a platform to do it.
Matt, I want to pick up on something you said about the difficulty of acquiring and exchanging and whatnot. One idea that I had years ago, and I stuck it in. It's currently an open issue, I think, in the Zcash GitHub repo, was having on-chain exchange functionality. And this is obviously having ZSAs is a prerequisite for that. But then once we have ZSAs, creating the ability to effectively do an atomic swap between ZEC and a shielded asset. Do you think that now that you could argue could be done with programmability, but it's also the sort of thing that could be done as a specific native implementation on the chain. Do you think that that's the sort of thing that we should be exploring?
Yeah, I do. I think that the ability to do, even just having basic AMMs, right? You don't have to have all of DeFi. All of DeFi is crazy and complicated and requires very powerful programmability. But having workable liquid AMMs on Zcash would be valuable, and I think it would also make Zcash more survivable. Maybe it wouldn't be on Zcash, maybe it would be like some kind of adjacent overlay system, but I think that would be really useful, and I think especially, obviously assets is a prerequisite, but would make the whole ecosystem more robust.
Nathan, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I want to build the case more for payments based on what Zaki was saying, because I think that this sort of goes back to what I was talking about around building up or out. There's sort of this tendency for the user base to sometimes be insular or self-referential in DeFi, because it's easy to compose more DeFi with more DeFi, and then there's more ways you can interact within that system. And so then it's very natural for use cases like DAOs, where you are coordinating in these social groups. But I still see a lot of potential value in payments developing through cryptocurrency. And I do think there are hurdles. And I do think DEX could be a really important part of it, because one of the biggest hurdles is finding a counterparty who wants the asset that you have. And with sort of a DeFi backbone and more tokenized assets for more local currencies, the payment UX can integrate more of that, so that you don't need to find a counterparty who wants the asset you want to spend. You just need to find a counterparty who's anywhere on the same platform. And so I think that has the potential to sort of pull the network effects of all of these assets together more for payments use cases. And a final piece there is, I think, a defining feature of a payment in cryptocurrency is that it's not insular. So it's sort of like the complement to everything else, but it happens because there's some sort of off-chain interaction. And anchoring all of this to off-chain interactions and the real economy seems like super important for me. And I think the potential is there, and I do think DEXs are a huge piece of that.
Okay. Well, we are very nearly out of time, so starting with Daniel, do you want to give us just any final thoughts that you feel you haven't had a chance to say during this discussion?
Not really. I think we had a really interesting discussion. We pointed out, from regulation to applications to in partnerships. We have a lot of potential as an ecosystem. We need to really make an effort to make it happen. I'm all in for it.
Matt?
I'm really happy to see new faces here. I would really like to see more people step up into the research and governance roles. I think that will be valuable for this whole community.
Zaki?
I think Zcash has a lot to show for the acceleration of zero knowledge as a practical computer science thing. Over the last, since 2015, this is the big accomplishment. But I think there's a lot more that can be done. There's a lot of potential. I don't think this will be the biggest thing that Zcash accomplishes, and so I'm looking forward to that.
Right.
Let's see, on my mind right now is just, like I've seen more Zcash fans show up speaking different languages, and I think the ambassador program might be a big piece of that. And I also saw different people who couldn't make this for different reasons, and I would love to see more Zcash conferences, whether they're like developer focused or sort of like user community get-togethers around the world, and I would love to attend more. So that's just where my mind's at right now.
Cool.
And let's do more ZCons because they're awesome.
Yeah, it's great to be back in person for ZCon.